I'm not sure what's going on in Britain. Or let me say this, I don't know what's going on in London, because London is no longer an English city, and that's how they got the Olympics. I mean, they said we're the most cosmopolitan city on earth, but it doesn't feel English. I had a Californian friend come over 2 months ago, walk down the King's Road and said to me, well, where are all the English people? And I mean, I love having different cultures around, but when the parent culture kind of dissipates, you're left thinking, well, what's going on?
Jesus Christ, God incarnate, the most famous person throughout our modern history. For nearly 2,000 years, he has always been depicted as white. However, recently, over the past few decades, this assertion has begun to be challenged, and there is an ongoing debate, if you will, over what he really and truly looked like. Well, is there any evidence, any historical proof, any clues throughout scripture? Let's go through it all one by one. When it comes to the appearance of Christ, who would be a better impartial witness than the man who personally met him and sentenced him to death? Pontius Pilate was a Roman pagan who saw Christ up close and personal. Valerius Paterculus, a Roman historian, met and interviewed Jesus, who reported it to Pilate, who in turn wrote a letter to the Roman emperor, which at the time was Tiberius Caesar. Amongst many things, he gave a description of Christ's appearance. In it, he describes him as follows: his golden-coloured hair and beard gave to his appearance a celestial aspect. He appeared to be about 30 years of age. Never have I seen a sweeter or more serene countenance. What a contrast between him and his bearers, with their black beards and tawny complexions. So just by that account, he would sound like many modern Europeans. But let's examine all the other evidence. Are there any other depictions of Christ? We have another one from the Arco volume. In it we can read where Gamaliel was sent by the Sanhedrin to interrogate Joseph and Mary in regards to their child Jesus. It describes Christ as a picture of his mother, only he has not a smooth round face. His hair is a little more golden than hers, though it is much from sunburn as anything else. Who has golden hair and burns in the sun? His eyes are large and a soft blue and rather dull and heavy. This is all sounding very similar to Pilates' letter. Finally, we have another letter which is by Publius Lentulus, which could be translated as a dullard public official, so a Roman official who visited Judea at the time of Christ, and this letter was addressed to the Senate. In it, Christ's hair is described as the colour of chestnut, full ripe down to the ears, so again that would be a blondish colour. Furthermore, he says his face without spot or wrinkle, beautiful with a lovely red. So red cheeks, who do you see red cheeks on? His eyes, grey, clear and quick in reproving hypocrisy. So that's 3 different accounts, all giving a very similar depiction of Christ. However, let's see what the Bible actually says. When God created Adam, the first man, he created him in the image of himself, in the image of God. Since Christ is God, it would only make sense that whatever Adam looked like would give us an idea to Christ's appearance. Furthermore, why did God specifically name the first man Adam? The name Adam is derived from Strong's H119, Adam, meaning to show blood in the face, i.e. to flush or turn rosy. Blushing is a hot red flushing of the cheeks unique to white people when they feel humility, shame or embarrassment, and is often associated with the inability to hold the head up and bear another's gaze. Even Darwin described blushing as the most peculiar and most human of all expressions. So what is God telling us here? That Adam could show blood in the face, could blush, had rosy cheeks. In that case, what would Eve look like, who was from Adam, and what would all their descendants look like? Is it not obvious to what Christ would look like? Throughout the Bible, we see the Israelites commonly described as being ruddy in their appearance. The word ruddy, similar to Adam, means when a white person has a red color, suggesting good good health, a rosy complexion, and is associated with blushing or showing blood in the face. In the book of Samuel we read that when Samuel discovered a young David, he was described as ruddy, with a beautiful countenance and goodly to look at. In other words, he was healthy looking with bright red rosy cheeks. David is again described this way in his duel with Goliath, ruddy with a fair countenance, so that's twice. David's son Solomon in the Songs of Solomon is also described as white and ruddy. It does not get more clearer than that. Since Christ descended from both David and Solomon, would he not resemble them? Would he not also be white and ruddy? Another word often used is fair, which is an Old English adjective meaning to have pale skin or pale yellow golden hair. So fair means light, such as a light white skin complexion, white to rosy red skin, beautiful and pleasing to the eye. In Genesis we read that the sons of God, the angels, saw the daughters of men, Adamites, that they were fair, and they took them wives, all of which they chose. In the book of Job we read, and in all the land there were no women found so fair as the daughters of Job. And in Daniel we read that Daniel and his friends, at the end of 10 days their countenance appeared fairer and fatter in flesh. In Acts we read, in which time Moses was born and was exceeding fair. And back to Songs of Solomon, thou art all fair, my love, there is no spot in thee. Is it not obvious, if all these Israelites were fair, then so was Christ, he must have been white with fair skin. So what was the earliest artwork of Christ and the apostles like? How were they depicted? Looking at the early pictures from churches, monasteries, caves and catacombs, it's clear that Christ was always known to be white. The earliest known images are around the 3rd and 4th century. Initially he had no beard with short hair, but later on the images began to add a thick beard and longer hair. Modern images often tend to follow this today. Early depictions you can also clearly see the apostles were white, just like Christ. There are numerous pictures of Paul and John, as well as Peter and his brother Andrew. There have been attempts to deliberately Photoshop or alter pictures to show a different narrative. So what did Christ look like? Is it not pretty clear from all the evidence? We must remember the apostles travelled to Europe exclusively, and there was never any doubt that they were white. The land around Judea and northern Africa was a white civilization. Only after the Arab conquest, 700 years later, did that permanently change forever. And this is how Christ and the apostles were white. But the people now living in those lands 2,000 years later are not.
The National Park Service says the persistent whiteness of its 419 parks is an existential crisis.
You stop it! You are a white male!
True.
Stop it! You are a white male! Your skin is light enough! Stop it!
You're a white woman with blonde hair. Yeah? That's racist. You are racist.
You're fucking a white male!
Realize the biggest terror threat in this country is white men.
Say to the people who dragged a poor white guy out of a car and beat him.
Oh my goodness, poor white people, please, oh my, stop it.
It means recognizing that there is one common enemy, the white man. We need to address the fact that, all of these groups of people, the issues they face, it all comes from the same people, white men. So we need to get rid of them.
I don't even know what diversity means, but whatever. Thank you.
It means non-white men.
When is it okay to kill whites? New York professor says having a white nuclear family promotes white supremacy. Professor tweets that white people should commit mass suicide. College professor says kill cops, kill all white people, and kill the straights. Professor says all I want for Christmas is white genocide.
When we say we want to kill whitey, we don't really mean we want to kill whitey, we do. But when we say we want to kill whitey, it's like it's a capitalist, not today.
Wanted to kill whites.
5 police officers were killed in the attacks last night. Another 7 were wounded, and 2 civilians were shot. The Dallas police chief says 1 gunman is dead and 3 other suspects are in custody. It is unclear how many shooters were involved. We have.
All right, hold up. Is it recording? Yep. All right. Why don't we murder more white people? Take 1.
I think we don't murder more white people because it's very dangerous to do so.
I'm angry at white people most of the time.
A step guide on how to get the vice of whiteness out of you. Be less arrogant, be less oppressive, be more humble.
The white race is the most violent and oppressive force of nature on Earth.
I saw a thing in that said a lot of men, white men, were committing suicide. And I almost thought, yeah, great. And then I thought about it a little more, and I thought, well, maybe you shouldn't say that in public.
White Americans will soon be a minority, and that's great.
Whites will not be the majority. I mean, it's an exciting transformation of the country. It's an exciting evolution and progress of our country.
It's a kind of utopia, just the fact that the whole world will mix up with each other, that in, 70, 80 years, there will be no white people anymore, and only cappuccino-colored people.
But that's the only way. This is the only solution. This is my way of thinking.
Mix up.
It's our only hope, is our way out of this.
Yes.
It's going to take some time.
Georgetown professor says all white people are racist. Trinity College professor calls white people inhuman. Let them fucking die. College professor says believing in hard work is a white ideology. College professor says white people are conditioned to commit mass murder. A professor equates math with white privilege. A professor says white supremacist patriarchy is responsible for the Vegas shooting. Professors hold a white racism course at FGCU. USC professor calls for Holocaust against all white people. Professor says I'll teach my children to be cautious and distrust friendship with white people. Baltimore professor says white people need to personally give all of their money to black people. College professor says some white people may have to die to solve racism. College professor says white masculinity is a problem for America. Georgetown professor says all white people are racist. Rutgers professor was taken to the NYC hospital for psychiatric evaluation after he tweeted threatening to kill white people. White professor calls all white people to mass suicide because of slavery. Here's a slide from a college classroom that says white tears on a mug. Here's another slide from a college classroom that says white people stay colonizing. White privilege does exist. Bigfoot, unicorns, reverse racism, what do they all have in common? Stating that reverse racism isn't real. Y'all white people are dangerous. The horror story is white people are a plague to the planet.
We're witnessing the end of white America as we know it. The question is, how long and how expensive will the funeral be?
Alliance shoot to kill Yamaza, kill the poor, the farmer, kill the poor, the farmer. Brr, pa, pa, brr, pa, pa. Attention.
The current wave of anti-Semitism in Sweden will pass, and that Jews have an important role to play in a country undergoing profound change.
I think there's a resurgence of anti-Semitism because at this point in time, Europe has not yet learned how to be multicultural. And I think we're going to be part of the throes of that transformation, which must take place. Europe is not going to be the monolithic societies that they once were in the last century. Jews are going to be at the center of that. It's a huge transformation for Europe to make. They are now going into a multicultural mode, and Jews will be resented because of our leading role.
Now, coming back to your question of the clash between the secular post-Christian Europe and the new immigration wave, which is essentially religious, yes, this is exactly what is happening. There is a clash of civilizations. And we, the Jews, we are in the middle of this clash of civilization.
All this week, BBC London is looking at the changing face of London and what it means for the capital. Figures compiled for the programme suggest that in the next 20 years, the ethnic diversity of this city will change dramatically.
For the first time ever, the number of people who class themselves as white British is now a minority in London.
People who identify as white British citizens are now a minority in their capital cities.
White folks are on track to becoming, and I hate to say this, the minority in America.
A new report out by the government shows that by the year 2042, white Americans will no longer represent the majority of the population. That prediction is 8 years sooner than previously expected.
That the native French population would be finding itself in a rapidly decreasing minority.
Her kan etnisk norske være i mindretall om 20 år i 2030.
Children from white families in Birmingham are set to become a minority group for the first time when this year's census is collected in March.
The latest census suggests white British-born are now in a minority.
Census Bureau says whites will be a minority.
Californians know a thing or two about demographic change. 70% of all state school pupils in Los Angeles are Hispanic.
For the first time in American history, non-whites will make up half or more of the next generation, according to a new study by the Pew Research Center.
The latest census suggests that white Brits are now in a minority in London.
And the fact that we are going to become a minority in our own country before 2050, well before 2050 for the younger people.
When the parent culture kind of dissipates, you're left thinking, well, what's going on?
And we British are being turned into strangers in our own land. And we were never asked whether we even wanted it.
Godfather of the European Union, Richard Coudenhove-Kalergi, published the plan for a united Europe and the ethnocide of the peoples of Europe. The encouragement of mass non-white immigration was central to the plot. Since then, an unholy alliance of leftists, capitalists and Zionist supremacists has schemed to promote immigration and miscegenation with the deliberate aim of breeding us out of existence in our own homelands. As indigenous resistance to this human genetic modification industry grows, the criminal elite seeks new ways to camouflage their project. First, their immigrant pawns were temporary guest workers. Then it was a multiracial experiment. Then they were refugees. Then the answer to a shrinking population. Different excuses, different lies. And asylum is just another one. But the real aim stays the same. The biggest genocide in human history. The final solution of the Christian European problem. This crime demands a new set of Nuremberg trials, and you people will be in the dock. Isn't it strange how, for some reason, all white countries and only white countries have this forced mass immigration from the third world? There has been no vote about this at all. I often hear it said that people should have the right to live wherever they want. But if they think people should live wherever they want, then why do we have forced integration? When the government forces integration of non-whites into white neighborhoods, we see the phenomenon of white flight.
And I know a good many people who have moved, and I'm still in touch with them.
And they're white?
Oh yes, they're all, white British, yes.
I want to live cheek by jowl with them and slowly but surely find that I'm the only person left in an area where everybody else has moved away from, and that's what's going on.
All the traditional communities are outnumbered completely by newcomers, and the newcomers keep on and on rolling in. It has a very alienating effect.
When white people live together in their own communities, those communities are then deemed too white. Millions of dollars are spent to make sure that these areas become more diverse. If everyone had freedom of association, then how could an area be too white? This seems like a huge contradiction. To say, yes, people have the right to live wherever they want, but why do we have forced integration?
Uncle Sam wants to help you diversify your neighborhood, whether you like it or not. Tonight, correspondent Doug McElway tells us about a new interactive effort that some people say is a huge overreach.
It's called Affirmatively Furthering Fair Housing. It will require the feds to gather data on segregation in every single American neighborhood and remedy it. In every single American neighborhood and remedy it.
Whether you like it or not.
When white people move to new neighborhoods, we see the process start again. The government forces integration.
In every single American neighborhood and remedy it.
And whites flee.
First, they import millions and millions and gazillions of non-whites into otherwise all-white living spaces without a vote, without a discussion. Any discussion is met with what? Well, it's met with psychological, you're racist, you're Nazi. You know, only whites can be racist. All whites are racist forever, so on and so forth. And then, of course, they force integrate, they force assimilate. And while they're doing that, they basically, everything's multiracial, multicultural, multiracial, interracial relationships. They do this in white countries and only white countries, and they tell us about our inevitable brown futures.
It's important to remember that our country is stronger because of our diversity.
We strive to bring the benefits of diversity to our students, to our school, to higher education, to the state of Texas, and to the nation as a whole.
Now, diversity.
So it's really important that if we get a more diverse profile of councillors at community and at... So it's really important.
There can be no ethnically pure state in Europe. We have a whole program of diversity which was aimed entirely at chasing down white people. So we have white flight, assimilation, that diversity means that all whites must be chased down. All whites must be chased down, which is what the word diversity means. Well, diversity means that whites can't escape. Yeah.
Yeah. And as you say in the article, white flight is declared as racism.
Yeah. It is considered, it is what diversity is meant to reverse. Chase down. Those two words are critical. Chase down white people. That explains the situation.
Uncle Sam wants to help you diversify your neighborhood, whether you like it or not. Whether you like it or not.
So it's really important.
All whites must be chased down, which is what the word diversity means.
It's going to be totally different. Most of the population will be non-white, maybe in 25 years.
Well, yeah, and it's not like we were discussing out in the office today. It's not just about immigration. It's also about intermarrying and all of these different phenomenons that are going on in society.
In every single American neighborhood and remedy it.
Wesley Clark is the head of NATO, standing in Europe, said, you know, there's no room for ethnically pure states in Europe. He's not talking to Arabs, he's not talking to Turks, he's not talking to Chinese or Africans or Mexicans. He's talking to basically white children in Europe.
So they have to be forced by the government to bring in the third world into all white living spaces.
Chase down white people.
Diversity means chasing down every last white person.
It is considered, it is what diversity is meant. Chase down. Those two words.
And on top of this actual phenomenon that we can all witness, we have the propaganda.
Every ad I see now has some kind of mixed couple of some sort. I see this being pushed everywhere. White men are made to look nerdy and stupid. They can't dance and they're so boring. But the non-white men are made to look strong, masculine, and heroic. It is no longer a good thing to have white children. They are considered boring and undiverse.
Not only do you have propaganda, which is massively anti-white, we have weaponized words. Anyone that talks about any of these topics is always called one particular word. And can you guess what that word is?
The R word.
Racist. Anytime you have propaganda and weaponized words, especially words that are supposed to set off triggers to shut you down, to keep you shut up, and we have phenomenon, we're no longer in the realm of propaganda. If you have propaganda backed up by phenomenon, we're now into warfare, psychological warfare.
Yep.
And psychological warfare is always reduced down to, you're either with us or against us. You have to have something to say when people are calling you a name, especially in a mean, malicious way. And the word racist is used as a weapon all over Western civilization. It's used to stigmatize. It's used basically to silence any opposition. And what you want to do is not be silent. So when someone calls you a racist, you just say, you're just saying it because I'm white. Anti-racism is a code word for anti-white. So when called a racist, you want to respond accordingly. You're just saying it because I'm white. Anti-racism is just a code word for anti-white. Racism only applies to white people's homes, white people's churches, white countries. It doesn't apply to anyone else. They're not trying to yell racism anywhere else. Racism is an anti-white hate slur, is really what it is. And the phenomenon in Western civilization is massive amounts of immigration. You can't debate it. You can't even talk about it, or you're a Nazi. We've all heard the words before. So we have forced immigration, forced integration, forced assimilation, and then they tell us about our inevitable brown future. Mm-hmm. They're doing this in white countries and only white countries. China is still going to be Chinese 50 years from now. Africa is still going to be Africa. Saudi Arabia is still going to be full of Arabs, but we're all supposed to be blended.
Quel est l'objectif? Ça va faire parler, mais l'objectif, c'est relever le défi du métissage. Défi du métissage que nous adresse le XXIe siècle. Ce n'est pas un choix, c'est une obligation, c'est un impératif. On ne peut pas faire autrement, au risque de nous trouver confrontés à des problèmes considérables. Nous devons changer, alors nous allons changer.
They would like us to believe that this is all accidental.
Oh, yeah.
This isn't happening in a vacuum, by the way. Nicolas Sarkozy, now he was the head of France. He's the big deal in France. This guy's top of the league in France. Talking about forcing miscegenation is targeted towards children. So this isn't happening in a vacuum. And you can listen to exactly what he's saying.
Mais l'objectif, c'est relever le défi du métissage. Défi du métissage que nous adresse le XXIe siècle.
He's saying that the current rates of intermixing, miscegenation, there's a translation, are too low. They're going to have to do something to force it.
Ce n'est pas un choix. C'est une obligation. C'est un impératif. On ne peut pas faire autrement.
There's more than a few human rights violations in that speech, and this goes to the heart of the plan. If you look at the anti-white proposition, there can be no all-white countries anywhere, and there can be no all-white areas in the formerly all-white countries. This is the anti-white proposition. It doesn't matter if you go to France, it doesn't matter if you go to Germany, it doesn't matter if you go to America. You've got all of these countries trying to make themselves non-white without a debate. Well, actually, any debate is met with what? You're a racist, you're a neo-Nazi, you're a white supremacist. It's always the same thing. And this is happening, of course, in every white country, all white countries. No one's exempt from this stuff. And of course, it just doesn't happen that way. It doesn't accidentally occur. Psychological warfare means war. It means there's planning. It doesn't happen by accident. You can't have something like that without a plan. There has to be an agenda. You're not going to accidentally try to make China non-Chinese.
So let's break this down again. You have forced mass non-white immigration into white countries, and only white countries. Upon this, we have the government forcing integration to all white living spaces within the country. And then they promote miscegenation all day and all night while demonizing everything that is traditional or white. It's genocide.
You can't have something like that without a plan. There has to be an agenda. You're not going to accidentally try to make China non-Chinese.
When the parent culture kind of dissipates, you're left thinking, well, what's going on?
It's genocide. Yep. It's one of the largest psychological operation schemes in the history. It'll be studied for hundreds, if not thousands of years as the largest psychological operation scheme ever. You know, the largest phenomenon of immigration, forced integration, forced assimilation, and the inevitable brown future for white countries and only white countries, matched with, you know, the phenomenon of the open borders and everything else, matched with massive anti-white propaganda, programming and propaganda. And the two together combine to make an operations. Operation is phenomenon backed by propaganda. I mean, it's something we can readily observe.
And the task is to bring this minority together in such a way that it makes it impossible for the legacy of whiteness to continue to reproduce itself. The task is to bring this minority together in such a way that it makes it impossible for the legacy of whiteness to continue to reproduce itself.
They're silly, and it's a genocidal scam. You know, most people watching this is going to include, well, this diversity stuff is just a genocidal scam.
The anti-white narrative and just the outright hostility towards whites in America and really all across the world is just so blatantly in your face.
They keep saying that this is to meet some kind of diversity quota, but I don't see them enforcing this diversity agenda in, say, Japan or Africa.
It was a black immigrant came in and said, "It's too white here." And
well, imagine if you were to go into China and say, you know, it's too Chinese.
Well, of course.
It seems to be like diversity just means less white people.
I know we're going to get people writing in saying that genocide is typically a violent crime. No, it's not. If you look at the 1948 Act,
the UN definition of genocide is A. Killing members of the group. B. Causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. C. Deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. D. Imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. E. Forcibly transferring children of the group to another group.
And deliberately inflicting on that group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. Now, go to any city centre which is inundated with the third world. You will not see any white people in Tower Hamlets. You won't see white people in all parts of Luton, parts of Leicester, all across the country, because they have been driven out. They have lost their right to exist as a culture and a race in their own country.
The peoples of Britain and Europe have lost their place in the world. I think it is right for people to have a place they call home, an identity that they're proud of. I think it for all people around the world, and I think it for the people of this country. And I hope tonight you can vote to say you think that too.
The state fair ended on a sour note last night after yet another outbreak of violence. And today, police fear that the string of assaults may be race-related.
2 officers were injured and 5 people were arrested last night, marking the 3rd time that a large group of young black people were involved in assaults in or around the fairgrounds.
We had reports that these juveniles were attempting to assault white citizens.
What we've got to realize is that there is a war going on right now in which people are being killed between the white Christian West and the Jewish-led colored hordes of the earth who are rising to slaughter and murder white people under the banners of communism.
We have to exterminate white people off of the face of the planet to solve this problem.
Our borders are wide open. You have 3,000 illegal immigrants coming across the border every day.
We have an aging white America. They're dying. It's a matter of time. The explosion is in our population.
It reminded me of Paul Revere when he was saying, you know, the British are coming, the British are coming. Well, the Latinos are coming, the Latinos are coming.
You can't stop us. There's too many of us. We're ready. We're breeding by the day. You think we have kids because we like sex? No, we're having kids ready to start this war. Believe me. I got another one on the way, and she'll be strapped up ready for you. Come get it. We're ready. We're ready. Ashe, Mitaku Yase.
Change has come to America.
Supporters packed Grant Park by the tens, if not hundreds of thousands, to watch America elect its first black commander-in-chief.
Leave it to Beaver. Father knows best. That America does not exist anymore.
Kirkland is accused of killing Esme Kinney. He's a registered sex offender already wanted on other charges.
Barnes confessed to stabbing 16-year-old Megan Landowski inside her home back in 2008.
When Megan came home from school, Robert surprised her, sexually assaulted her, then stabbed her 40 times.
Gang members threw a white victim through a door in Lodo. He walked up to the white male and without provocation punched him in the face.
A teenager is killed during what appears to be an attempted carjacking.
They are members of two different street gangs that came together to assault, beat, and rob mainly white people they found walking alone.
The murders of Shannon Christian and Chris Newsom.
According to the 46-count grand jury indictment, Chris Newsom was repeatedly gang raped while Shannon was forced to watch. The assailants tortured Newsom, shot him, and set him on fire. The attackers then tortured Shannon, gang raped her, poured bleach down her throat to destroy DNA evidence, and murdered her.
Newsom's body was found bound and burned. He was shot at least 3 times. Christian's body was found a few days later in a nearby home. Her body had been stuffed inside a large trash can in the home's kitchen.
The national news media, they say, spends plenty of time covering white-on-black crime, but has completely ignored the story here in Knoxville.
Bill O'Reilly, Sean Hannon, and the other Jew tools, they won't do their job. They won't tell you what's actually going on.
The suspect's name is Christopher McEwen. He was arrested early Saturday morning. Sheriff's deputies found the body of 21-year-old Janice Shearer in McEwen's pickup truck. Inside the house, they discovered one of the victim's ears in a pot on the stove and another piece of flesh nearby.
Police this evening confirmed the identities of the 5 victims: Edward Gentry Sr., Edward Gentry Jr., his wife Pam Gentry, their son Jeremy, and Jeremy's girlfriend Kristen Warnicki, all shot and killed on November 12th.
When they arrived here around 3 a.m., the home was engulfed in flames, and all 5 people on the property were already dead.
23-year-old Jeremy Pickney and 23-year-old Samuel Conway were arrested in connection to the brutal murders. 22-year-old Marvin Stringer was shot and killed by authorities Thursday night after investigators attempted to serve a search warrant.
This is not some random tragedy of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Whites are murdered all the time because that is what the people who created the system want to happen. That's why we focus on the Jews and the system they built. Those are primarily the Jews.
I do think that a very great number of people in America are very uncomfortable with the fact that we are changing, and changing in a fairly radical way demographically.
You need to make sure your child can speak Spanish.
The Census Bureau has predicted that in the year 2050, white Americans will lose their majority. We are, for the very first time in our history, a genuinely multiracial democracy in which no one group predominates, not whites, not Protestants.
It's genocide against white people. It's Africa for the Africans, Asia for the Asian, white countries for everybody.
We've had 40 years of gunpoint coerced integration, and Shannon Christian is the result. It is the fruit of integration.
It's genocide against white people.
We're having kids ready to start this war. Believe me. We're ready. We're ready. Ashe, Mitaku Yase.
Dark clouds are hanging over Europe. The European people have been utterly betrayed by their elite. The magnitude of this conspiracy is unprecedented in human history. Our ruling elite has turned out to be a mere corrupt lackey of global capitalism. These high-priced parasites have stolen the Europeans, their livelihood, their land, their future, and their self-esteem. These prostitutes of the corporate world have exposed Europe to an endless rampage of brutal beggars and forcefully denied Europeans any means of defending themselves. We have become powerless. We have lost control over our lives. We are denied our place in this world, and our spirit is waning. What once was ours has been taken away and given to greedy aliens. What we once held sacred is ridiculed and mocked by arrogant intruders. What once was familiar to us has now been degenerated into something strange and threatening. For decades, Europeans have been taught to hate and despise themselves. Generations of Europeans have been brought up believing that the world would be a better place without them. They have been brought up to feel the crushing weight of the white man's endless guilt. Europeans are constantly reminded that only through self-destruction can they pay for the sins of their civilization. The death of Europe is the fashion of the day, our demise a sign of progress. The disintegration of the traditional Europe a way forward, the predatory invasions against Europe only the latest trend, self-hatred a sure sign of intellectual thinking. We are called to celebrate the physical, intellectual, cultural and spiritual collapse of our civilization. We have already been brainwashed to believe that the collapse is inevitable and that it is a law of nature that we should die out and the barbarian hordes at our gates should win. Under the disguise of liberalism, humanism and democracy, Europeans have been persuaded to commit an ethnic suicide. A race that has achieved so much and has survived so much has been tricked to welcome its own downfall and to take active measures in order to become a stranger on its own soil. We are witnessing the most vicious and cruel conspiracy in history, the conspiracy to replace the European people, a systematic campaign to wipe out the Europeans from the existence.
Dann gibt's ja noch was. Jedes Jahr sterben mehr Deutsche als geboren werden. Das liegt zum Glück daran, dass die Nazis sich auch nicht besonders vervielfältigen.
First by socially degenerating the people and then through mental and physical retardation to paralyze the ability of the people to resist, to poison the very biological stock where all the great deeds of the past once grew, so that in the end a herd of geldings would be easier to usher to their death rather than the once proud race of warriors, craftsmen and explorers. As our situation deteriorates, the harsh realities of life will force the European people to open their eyes.